Good afternoon and welcome back, ladies, gents and Pikachus, to another analysis and breakdown of the Qur'an of the Muslims. Yes, we are back once again to break this thing down verse by verse into factual English statements that make sense to our logical brains so that we can understand who or what is Allah, what does he mean by the contents of this very strange, incoherent, rambling religious text of Islam, and more importantly for us, with the knowledge of this in our heads, how does this affect us in our lives today? So as I always do before I start, I'm going to kindly ask you now if you have any doubts or questions as to my factual accuracy or the things I'm about to say, please first buy and read one of these, a Tajweed Qur'an with the meanings translated into English. After you have done so, then you'll realise everything I'm going to say to you now or have previously said is 100% true of the words of Allah and what Muslims believe today, despite their denials and protestations, because they are ashamed of the truth of this book, and to be quite honest with you, they should be. So with that in mind, let's carry on where we left off last time. So we've been going through the Allah narrated version of the Moses story, and we got as far as Moses doing a holy cow sacrifice or not doing a holy cow sacrifice, but the Jews were definitely there, so the Jews are bad. Then Moses killed the guy, Allah raises him from the dead, so Moses is a murderer, but Allah's grace and mercy make him not. So what we learn from the last bit is Moses is a bad guy if you're a Jew, but if you believe in Allah, then you can have Moses and he's a good guy. So Allah is trying to steal the Prophet Moses from the Jews and add him to his own narrative in the book of Allah Akbar, this thing here. So that's where we're going to pick up from, and this is the page we are going to read from verse number 77, this bit here. So without further ado, let's carry on. 77. Knoweth they not that Allah knoweth what they conceal and what they reveal? A short verse to start with, but I feel like this is exactly the kind of thing we expect from Allah. So if we break this down, he's still talking about the Jews. Like, have you noticed how we're 12 pages in and 10 of those 12 pages have been him talking, gossiping about the Jews? That's Allah. Allah is a gossip queen. He just whinges on about the Jews, even though he's probably never actually met one. And the reason he wants to whinge about the Jews and their prophet Moses is so you believe me. Trust me, bro. Allah. God's not real. Allah's God. This is the real book, not the Torah. The Torah is just written from this, even though this is from the future. Remember? So that's why now he's saying, know they not? Allah knows what they conceal and what they do reveal. Allah is trying to say, these guys over here, they don't actually have any hidden religious secrets. You know, their Torah is meaningless. Allah's got those same secrets, and Allah's the one that gave them those secrets. So Allah knows what they conceal in their holy book and what they are not telling the Arabs, and what they conceal, i.e. their secret plan to destroy Islam, even though we haven't gone through that bit yet. That's what this means, and it's nonsense, and it's a good way to start this page. And we carry on. 78. And there are amongst them illiterates. Illiterates who know not the book, but see therein their own desires, and they do nothing but conjecture. End of verse. So, what he's saying here is, even though we're calling them the people of the book, that's what Allah calls these guys, the Jews and Christians are the people of the book, amongst them there are illiterates. So there are people of the book that can't actually read the book. They just look at the pages and they just make up whatever they hear. That's what he's saying here. He's saying the Jews are actually illiterates. Unless they're agreeing with him and things his new revelation, you know, the revelation in this book has said, then they must surely be illiterate. That's the only reason why they're saying these wrong things. Because Moses changed their book. So he's evil and their book is evil, but they're illiterate anyway, so they're not even reading the changed evil book from Moses. They're just doing it because it's their own silly human desires. Oh, they're just evil, but Allah knows what they reveal, what they conceal, so you better follow Allah, otherwise you'll be like them. That's the between the lines. And they do nothing but conjecture. Now, what does conjecture mean? Conjecture means you take two ends of things which were true and you process them as if they are one and the same, and you come out with a thing that's guessed. You know, a conjecture is an educated guesswork. So that is what he's saying the Jews are doing, even though that's what he's doing here. He's trying to take bits and bobs of stuff that he has heard in the marketplace when he was Mohammed, and process them together into a new revelation. That's exactly what he's done here. Because he knows you're going to know that, because you've read the book, he's going to say, that's what those evil Jews were doing. They're the ones that have the conjecture. My one's actually true. He's baiting and switching. He's saying, actually, this is like the Torah. This is the book of wisdom. This is the godly truth. And that one's just conjecture. They just made it up and they're illiterate anyways. It's going to be wrong. Only an idiot would have written this down. Mohammed, you are a dung-brained moron. I should be looking down. He's probably in hell, isn't he? Burning forever. Anyway, so we carry on. 79. Woe to those who write the book with their own hands, and then say, this is to Allah, to traffic with it a miserable price. Woe to them, for their hands do write, and they gain and for the gains they make thereby. End of verse. So, if we break this one down, Allah is still talking about the Jews. And notice we're almost halfway through page 12 now. He has said nothing of his Muslims. He knows his Muslims are on the end of this listening, so he said, I am great and powerful, wise, merciful and truthful Allah. You must worship me and do exactly what I tell you, or you will die in a horrible, nasty way. And this is my revelation to you. This is the godly, heavenly truth, O Muslims. Those Jews are evil. Those Jews are bad. Moses is bad. Moses is illiterate. Jews are illiterate. They did the sinful cow. Hate them. Kill them. They're secretly wanting to kill you. They've got a false god. They hate you. They're at war with you. Kill them. That is... that is the divine truth of the Qur'an so far. And this is like the nice version, you know? This is the one they suggested to me because it's very boring and very rounded out in their heads. And they thought, had I read this one to you, surely you would have seen the truth of Allah, that they're not racist, genocidal maniacs who want nothing but war and rape and death. They're just lovely, misunderstood holy men. And Allah's real. Surely you can see that. But no, we cannot... Well, you make your own mind up. I don't want to assume what you believe. But I think, even though we've only gone through 11.5 pages, we can already see Allah for what he is. A imagined demon from the mind of Mohammed while he is under the bewitchment of Satan. That's what's happening here. Satan is actually Allah. So that means there is no such thing as Allah. It's actually just Satan. And the reason why he's using the word Allah is because he's speaking through his bewitchment of Mohammed when he wrote this book. And Mohammed couldn't very well just say Satan, could he? So instead of saying Satan, he said Allah, which is, even though he got it wrong, what he thought the name of God actually was, because it used to be Allah. If you're a pre-Islamic Arab and you're talking about the Jewish God of the desert, he is called Elohim. Now, they didn't have an O character. They had an R character. So that meant when they're talking about Elohim, they say Elaham. Sound familiar? So Elaham becomes Allah. And that's what used to be the name of God, Allah Akbar. And then they changed it to just Allah. So that's how we got here to Satan being called Allah. They're trying to say that guy over there isn't really God. This guy is him. And that guy over there is Satan. But they need an intermediary who is Mohammed. Which is why if you're Islamic, you think you're worshipping Allah. You're actually not. You're worshipping Mohammed. And Mohammed is worshipping Satan. So via proxy, Muslims are worshipping Satan. And that is why we got to this bit here. In 79, where he says, woe to those who write the book with their own hands. Because he's saying this wasn't actually written by Mohammed. This was written by Allah. Woe to those who write the book with their own hands. Oh, those filthy evil ape Jews over there who we hate. But there's a little problem with that. Because fairly sure, if we go right back to the first page, its letters were vowelized during the days of Al-Imam Ali. Dots were placed on the letters which resemble each other. So this very book was written by human hands. Even though you've said, woe to those who write this book with their own hands. They have written this book with their own hands. So they're hypocrites, cowards and liars, and they're infidels. And now they are damning themselves under Satan, who is Allah. See how this works. Anyone who has 2 brain cells or more to rub together and can read this evil, false doctrine can figure it out. So that's what I'm saying to you, O Muslims. Figure it out, Muslims. It's very simple. Allah is not Allah, Allah is Satan. Mohammed is not Jesus. Mohammed is Mohammed, the caravan-robbing paedophile, illiterate Nazi, who has given you this book to keep you away from the revelation of real God, which already existed. I can just imagine him sat there amongst the snake charmers in the markets of Agrabah, wherever the hell it was, listening to other holy men say their testimonies, and then he was like, oh, this sounds good, I will write this in my own revelation, I will give this to my Arabs and I will call them Islam, they will follow me. So that's what happened. He didn't actually have any revelation from God. He overheard revelations from God through other people, and then Satan was like, psst, Mohammed, why don't you trick out the Jews with an evil book called the Muhammad's Qur'an? And then this came about. That's what this means. So we finish the verse. Woe to those who write the book with their own hands, i.e. Mohammed. That's what it says. To traffic with it a miserable price. Woe to them, for their hands do write, and for the gain they make thereby. So it's even doubly worse for Mohammed, because he did make a huge gain by having this book created, didn't he? Think about it. Without this book, Mohammed would have stayed a pauper, trying to steal from caravans, and keeping like 2 or 3 wives and a slave. Then by the end of his life, because of this, the conquest that writing this book led him to, he ended up having loads of slaves and like 1 million wives. And now the entire slaved Arabs say, oh, Muhammad, peace be to his holy name, peace be to Muhammad. Even though he died like a dog after being poisoned by a slave girl. And we know this, that's in their own hadith. So he wasn't a very good guy, but they want to worship him. Anyway, and he is woe to them because he wrote the book with his own hands. That's what this means. And we move on. 80. And they say, the fire shall not touch us but for a few numbered days. Say to them, have you taken promise from Allah? For he never break any of his promise, no. Or he say that Allah know what you do not know. End of verse, end of reading. No, not end of reading, end of quote. So, why am I putting the Arabic silly voices on this? It's for context. So he starts off by saying, and they say. So he's saying they as in the Jews, but the Jews that are in the Arab countries, because otherwise why would they be talking to them? So the Jews are now in an Arab country, even though we know they've just escaped and they're now setting up Israel, but we've put them back in Egypt just for this verse. And the Jews who are still in Egypt, who actually don't exist, are saying, the fire shall touch us, but only for a few numbered days. So he's referring to a future Christian doctrine where Jesus is killed on the cross, goes to hell for 3 days to face off with Satan, and then comes back up 3 days later and says, I have returned, and then goes to heaven. So that's what he's talking about here with a few numbered days. The number is 3. That's what it says in the Hafs actually as well, or the other Qur'ans. So the Jews who don't exist in Egypt because they've escaped are now back there. They are saying to the Muslims, we're not going to go to hell because we're only going to go 3 days, then we're going to get resurrected, just like Jesus, despite the fact that we're still in the time of Moses, and Jesus hasn't actually arrived yet. So this is claiming to prophesize Jesus, even though it was written 532 years after the coming of Jesus. Nothing to see here. Muhammad must be right. Muhammad, peace be unto his name, he must be right. Muhammad never make a mistake in his whole life, even when he was telling people to drink toilet water and saying that camel pee is a medicine for herpes. He was saying for herpes, it was a medicine. He must be right. So that's what this means. And then he says, in reply to that, have you taken a promise for Allah? Because he never breaks his promise. So the Muslims are saying back to the non-existent Jews who remained in Egypt, this thing you're saying about dying and then returning 3 days later, you must have a promise with Allah, right? Allah's the only one who can make those promises. Allah never break his promise, not any. Even though 12 pages in, he's had 18 mistakes and 2 broken promises already. So this verse is saying, through the Muslims to the non-existent Jews who we've made up during the time of Moses, so that we can say this to current day Muslims. Very convoluted, but that's Allah. They're saying to the current day Muslims, any of these Jews who are saved, they're only saved because they're secretly worshipping Allah. That 3 day thing's nonsense. Allah's promise is what's going to save them. That's the reason they're saved, not the 3 day thing, i.e. the book of Moses is wrong. Because Moses changed it, remember? That's what this means. 81. Nay, those who seek gain in evil and are girt round by their sins, they are companions of evil fire. There they shall abide forever. Now we get to the truth. So he's not saying the Jews are saved. He's saying if the Jews had a promise with Allah, then they would have been saved. But because those evil, naughty, nasty Jews who we hate don't have a promise with Allah, they got a promise with their God in Yahweh, they are going to be companions of the fire, and they are fat with sin. Definitely not because they have a very successful farming culture on the go now, and they've managed to have also sheep as well as farm stuff. So they have tons of food now and a big wall around them, and Israel has become a great nation, just like their God promised before they got to before they got to Egypt and then went and set up Israel. So I think what Allah is saying here is in relation to the Israelites having their covenant with God, which existed before he met Allah, before the Israelites met Allah, he knows that they had a promise with God through Abraham, and the promise was, if you go through Egypt, I will let you free, even though they won't want to free you. I'll let you beat the Egyptians and go free. Then your sons will set up Israel, and they will become a great, wealthy nation. That is the promise. Allah's going, nah, that promise ain't real, even though that's all happening. Secret agent Allah, it's only happening because of me. It's my mercy and grace has let them do that, despite the fact that I was trying to kill them and prevent them. And they did it anyway. And then they went, yeah, Yahweh's so great. And then I was on the seashore as a defeated demon god going, I will kill you all in future. This is my prophecy. I will invade Israel. I will kill you all. That's what he said. So now he's switching and baiting once again and saying, no, their promise ain't real. The real promise is Allah. That's why the 3 days thing is important. 3 days is what they believe. That's nonsense. Allah's promise is real. Trust me, bro, is what this means. And we don't. And then we move to 82. 82. But those who work faith and work righteousness, they are companions of the gardens. Therein shall they abide forever. Now, what does he mean by the gardens? When we break this down, he's saying, but those who have faith and work righteousness, i.e. not those Jews, not the Jews, they're not included in this. The ones who have faith in Allah and work righteousness of the Qur'an, the righteousness of killing those guys, they are going to be companions of the garden. They'll be living in a luxury garden with the Holy Hidden Mosque and the Virginal Brides. Even though he hasn't described that yet, we're going to get there. That's what he's talking about when he says garden. He's saying, I'm going to create similar to what the Garden of Eden has. But instead of it being God's garden, it's going to be a holy Muslim garden with a holy mosque and a virginal bride for the Muslims. That's what he's talking about. So he's just reminding his Muslims, if you do that stuff, you're damned to hell, I'll kill you and punish you forever. But if you do exactly what I tell you in this book, then you'll go to the holy mosque and get all your virginal brides. You'll be just having sex with virginal brides all day. It'll be amazing. It's much better than their Garden of Eden thing. Who wants to have redemption and salvation and truth and glory with real God when you can have virginal brides? I mean, come on, guys. Everyone knows that Muslims don't want salvation of God and truth and grace and beauty. What they actually want is a steady stream of virginal brides and a holy mosque. So of course that's what Allah is going to offer them. That's what this means. And then we move on to 83, the last verse of this page, which I'm very glad about. Isn't it just a mercy from Allah Akbar that he's made these pages shorter? Because I was getting really sick of those long pages. He's drawn out word salad verses. Now we're getting to the point, 20 minutes in. So, 83, the last verse. And remember, so we're back to Allah. For those of you who don't know, when he says, and remember, he's now going to describe something to you which you weren't there to witness, and tell you that you were there to witness it. So he's saying, remember this, as in you put it in your head as a memory, and remember it like this, even though you weren't there. So he's creating a false testimony image in your mind. Current day reader. 83. And remember, we took a covenant from the children of Israel to worship none but Allah, treat with kindness parents and kindred and orphans and those in need, and speak fair to the people, be steadfast in prayer and practice regular charity. But they did turn back, and they backslide even now. End of verse, end of reading. So, I love that verse. So, Allah is now saying to the Muslims, remember those evil Jews over there? They used to actually worship Allah. All the things that they are doing right are because of Allah. Allah's the one that told them to respect their parents. Allah's the one that told them to be peaceful and nice and do all the godly stuff. But they just kept turning back from it, so now they're not allowed to do it, and they're turning back from Allah, who was their original God, to do this new thing. Bait and switch. He's telling the Arab Muslims that their older, much more faithful, godly religion is actually a newer, made-up, written-by-man religion, and that this one's not made by man, newer, and a written religion. It's actually the older one that was Testament of God. So he's literally going... You didn't see anything there. This was the original book. It's like, come on, Allah, seriously? There could not be more of a marked difference between this Holy Bible, which was older and more accurate, than this terribly written Tajweed Qur'an with the meanings translated into English. So don't try and tell me that you baited and switched these two things and they're so similar, and the only things that they get different is the stuff that Moses changed during the time of Egypt. This guy is a delusional phony. Muslims, figure it out. We're 12 pages in. We've got 24 mistakes and 3 lies. Now Allah is trying to tell us that the stuff those Jews are doing that we said was evil like 2 pages ago is actually good. But it's good because Allah gave it to them, but now they've turned back and they're not doing it anymore. You can have holy virgins if you kill these guys and don't believe a word they say. But they're not even real because he's talking about Jews in Egypt after he described them escaping. Pray tell. Do you think any Jews remained as slaves in Egypt after the Moses incident? Because that is what you have to believe in order to believe the rest of what this book is saying. And thus we know in conclusion of this whole short episode, Allah is Satan because he is a figment of the imaginations of Muhammad in the Middle Ages, or the Dark Ages, 500 to 600 BC. Allah is actually a figment of his imagination while he is bewitched by Satan, and he has overheard in the marketplace many other holy stories from the Torah and from the Holy Gospels, which were written already at that time, and he has just amalgamated them together so that he can brainwash Arab Muslims into thinking that Allah is actually God, when it's not. It's just Muhammad's imaginary friend who is bewitched by by Satan. So I think we don't need to go much further into this one. So in summary of that page, we started off with Allah saying, remember those evil Jews, don't be like them or you won't get to the paradise garden I'm going to create with the holy virgins in. But if you do everything Allah tells you to do and you ignore those guys and their holy book, then you will. And their holy book was wrong anyway because it was written later than this one. Remember, it was actually copied from this one. The Jews copied it from this one, but then Moses changed it, so it's actually not as good. And then the last thing he says is, if you don't do this, you're bad, like those guys, but if you do it and kill those guys, then you'll be righteous and good. So says Allah, who's definitely the purest form of the divine text and the holy God. Trust me, bro. And that's the end of this video. So, hope you enjoyed that and you learned something. God bless you all. And I will see you lovely people in the next one. Bye now.
And if you would like to hear more about the evil Jews and the damnation that Allah will place upon their evil hearts, then meet me back here for more Without Lies Islam Dies tomorrow at the same time. In the meantime, God bless you all, have a lovely evening, and I will see you in the next one. Bye now.